Well, hello and an extremely warm welcome to my channel. My name is Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. A warm welcome if you're a returning viewer, and an equally warm welcome if you are settling back to watch my channel for the very first time. So I have been really busy this week, allegedly working, if you can call it that, because I am preparing for an interview with Paula Hawkins at 6 o'clock this Saturday night. And it's an online interview. You can you're all warmly welcome to join us. It's for the Women's Prize Book Club. It's 30 years celebrating the Women's Prize. So Simon Savage and my son, have been doing some live events in order to mark this momentous year. And Paula was a judge of the prize some years ago, and we're going to be in conversation with her. And so I have been rereading her, I think this, it was her debut, I'm pretty sure, The Girl on the Train, which became also a best-selling film, Hollywood film. And it's 20 years ago, can you believe that? 20 years since this book was published. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with it, but just in case you're not, this is the story of a woman who is basically commuting to and from London from the home counties, probably. And I mean, Paula just brilliantly captures that whole sort of commuter routine. The train is a thread throughout the whole novel, and rereading it, because it's many years since I read it and watched the film, was a real delight, because I'd completely forgotten. There were certain things that I was kind of predicting and thought were going to happen, but there are so many twists and turns in this story. And one of the wonderful things about it is that you've got a completely unreliable narrator. She's a woman who is making this commute. She drinks. She has lapses in memory, but she's fixated on a particular row of houses that she passes every day on the train, and she discusses the characters within those houses, two of them in particular, as if she knows them. And then there is the disappearance of a woman, and it's really, really hard to talk about this book without giving away spoilers, but it's really gripping. And then I've been reading, having reread that, I'm now reading Paula Hawkins's latest novel. I've not got far to go, look, The Blue Hour. And this again is a thriller. You're on the edge of your seat, but this time we're in the world of art. So this is the story of an artist who, when the novel opens, is already no longer alive, and it's about the legacy of her art. It's told from various perspectives. One of the characters is the I want to say young man, I suppose he's probably between youth and middle age, who is curating Vanessa Chapman's art. But Vanessa was reclusive. She lived on this island off the Scottish coast, which gets trapped. It becomes an island at certain times of the day when the tide's in, and closes the causeway between her and the mainland. And the novel is absolutely full of menace, twists and turns. It's narrated through extracts from her diary, through notes, through all sorts. There's an email at the beginning, which is really sinister, because the book opens with the discovery that one of her works of art, a sculpture, includes a human bone. And this is really controversial, partly because the artwork is currently on display at the Tate Modern. And so it's a book which unravels the story of Vanessa's life, but also of the lives of those around her. I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to give anything away, but we will be discussing this book on Saturday, and The Girl on the Train, and also talking about, the experience of judging the Women's Prize. So there we go. That's what, well, when I say there we go, that's what got me thinking about thrillers, page turners. I mean, I don't know what the definition of a thriller is. I probably should have looked it up, but then sometimes definition of genre is so fluid and changes from one era to another. So I'm kind of going to create my own. I don't actually think, certainly in the last sort of 20-30 years, I've read many thrillers, not books that have been specifically written as thrillers. So the point being that I've thoroughly enjoyed rereading The Girl on the Train and reading The Blue Hour. So it's that whole thing about reading a book. For me, a thriller is a book that keeps you on the edge of your seat from the minute you begin it, that takes you into a complete different world, introduces you to a whole cast of characters. Very often the narration is unreliable, or there are different perspectives and angles that you're seeing the story from. But for me, the main criteria is that you should be absolutely incapable of putting the book down. And there are many books that I've read that I find difficult to put down, but not because of the plot, I suppose, is where I'm coming to. So in terms of sort of me talking about thrillers, I want to be clear that that's what I mean. I'm talking about books that I found almost impossible to put down and have read late into the night when my eyeballs are sort of being propped open, and then I've often had to reread chunks of the next morning because I've got so tired I've forgotten what I read. So the first book that I want to talk about is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. Now, I don't know if you can see, but this is a really, really battered old book. The spine's all cracked, and it says in my best handwriting, Louise E. The E stands for Eleanor, in case you're remotely interested. This was given to me as a actually, I say as a present. The date is August 1979. And I suspect that I bought this in the summer holidays to read. Now, how old would I have been in 1979? I would have been about 14, I guess. Yes. No. Yes. I would have been about 14. In fact, 13. And actually, that feels about right. I think I was in my early teens when I first read The Moonstone, and again, it's a novel that is late Victorian novel. Wilkie Collins also wrote The Woman in White, and I can't quite remember which one I read first. I think I read The Woman in White first, and I know it really, really gripped me, but nothing for years and years. When you're sort of searching to replace the feeling you had when you read a book, I don't think it was a very, very long time that I got the same feeling that I had when I read The Moonstone, because I remember just all I wanted to do was just devour the book. I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't want to see my friends. I didn't want to play with my siblings. I just wanted to read this book. And it's really clever. It has a lot of those sort of tropes that I was talking about before. It's written through lots of different forms. So there are letters, there are journal entries, there are different perspectives, but the story focuses around a young woman called Rachel who is gifted for her 18th birthday a diamond, and it's huge. That's the Moonstone. It's this massive diamond, and she's been gifted it by an uncle who had lived in India under the Raj, and he has acquired, by very dodgy means, we suspect, this massive diamond and brought it back to England. And because he's fallen out with his family, he's a very dodgy character, he bequeaths the diamond to Rachel, and she wears it to her 18th birthday party, and the diamond is stolen. And after the party, there are three sort of main suspects, Rachel of whom is one of them because she's behaving very peculiarly. And the book then, you know, the whole sort of mystery, the rest of the novel, we as readers and the characters within the novel are trying to solve the mystery of the disappearance of this diamond. And it's just brilliant. There are deaths, there are drugs, you know, the whole, you know, and lots of twists and turns in the plot, but most brilliantly there are quicksands. And I just remember, you know, some of the scenes from this novel are etched like film in my brain, and I've never seen a film of it. You know, it's all the cinematic experience of reading this book, because Wilkie Collins' prose is really tight. Now, if you haven't read the book before and you decide to read it on my recommendation, just a word of warning, because it's a Victorian novel, it does take quite some time to get into. It's a very slow start. It's not an immediate grab. So it does come with that health warning, but oh my goodness, is it worth it? I just absolutely loved this book. In fact, I think I might download it and listen to it online, listen to it on my phone, because I feel like this has made me want to rekindle my love affair with this book. And the reason the spine is cracked so much is because I've read it at least 3 times during my life. And then next up, and it you know, I don't know when I read this. I think it came out in the early 1990s. It's Snow Falling on Cedars by David Guterson, and this was his debut novel. And bizarrely, I don't know why, I haven't read anything by him since, and I probably should. But this was another book that has absolutely stayed with me, and I would dearly love to read it again. And it's a case of too many books, too little time. And again, it's probably one that I will now go and listen to on audio. But this book was absolute genius. And again, I just could not put the darn thing down when I read it. And it was very, very popular at the time. I don't see it so often on the shelves in bookshops these days. But it's set in the early 1950s, so not that long after the Second World War. It's Washington State in America, and it's a fictional island. And a Japanese man has been arrested for murdering a fisherman on this island community. The fisherman's body has been found trapped in his own net. I remember there's a lot of importance placed on the fact that his watch has stopped at a particular time, and I really, the scenes of the impact of his death on his family have really stayed with me. So you get all the empathy of that, but the book's genius lies in the fact that the story, there's a trial taking place during the course of the novel, and the trial is being reported by a man called Ishmael. I can't remember his second name, but he's a journalist and he's reporting this story. But he's also anti-Japanese because he's lost a limb during the Second World War, because he fought against the Japanese, and so he's struggling, I suppose, to report the crime in an impartial way. And also we learn that there is a love interest, there is history between Ishmael and the Japanese suspect's wife. So again, you've got this fantastic sort of very tangled, you've got this tangled net that the body's been found in, but you've got this also sort of really tangled web of emotion that is sort of seething behind the background to the story. And it is a book that I stayed up late into the night devouring. I can still remember how I felt as I was reading it. There are still pictures fixed in here, and again, I've never seen a film of it. So that book for me, and isn't the cover wonderful? I love that. It's a bit like the landscape where I grew up, so I don't know whether that's had an effect on me as well. But yeah, Snow Falling on Cedars, absolutely wonderful book. And then this might surprise you that I've picked this as a book that I would consider to be a thriller, but again, I couldn't put this down. Robert Harris is a bestseller for a reason. And this book, Pompeii, I picked because I am obsessed with the ancient world. You know, I'm a classicist by trade, if that's the right word. So I only bought this, and I think sadly this might be the only book of Robert Harris's I've read, and I probably ought to do something about that. But I loved this book because it takes such an unusual view of the destruction of Pompeii, and again it's an absolute page turner. There are thriller elements all the way through this book, but when I tell you about this sort of what's the word, I can't think of the word, the premise, that's the word I'm looking at, the premise of this novel, you'll think, how can that possibly be? And I think that's what I loved about it, actually. How can that possibly be material for a page turning book? But so it's weeks, possibly months before the eruption of Vesuvius, the volcano that destroyed Pompeii. And Robert Harris takes this character, I think he's called Marcus, could be wrong about that, and he is a young water engineer, a hydrologist. Yes, because in ancient Rome, they had the most fantastic water systems, drainage systems, systems for collecting water, sewage systems, you name it. The Romans were absolutely genius with anything water related, anything engineering related. So there was this very complex system of aqueducts, taking water down to the resort cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum and Napoli and all those places. In fact, they were probably more sophisticated, possibly, than the ones that are there right now. But anyway, so of course, because of they don't know it, the characters in the novel, but because there's this imminent eruption, things are happening under the ground and the water system starts to falter. And Marcus is a young hydrologist, and his boss has mysteriously disappeared. And so there is no one else, you know, it becomes his responsibility to try and sort this problem out. And along the way, he encounters a young woman whose father is absolutely beastly, and his prized collection of fish have died, and he's thrown his slave into and drowned him because he's blaming him for the death of his fish, but actually the water has been polluted by sulfur. So there's this whole, you know, from the Roman perspective, there's this whole mystery around what on earth is happening to the water, and then the supply stops altogether, and there is murder, and there is what's the word, I want to say embezzlement, that's not the word, but there are really sort of deceitful underhand projects going in this book. And I just absolutely loved it. It took me to a whole different world. I could not put it down, and I commend it to you. And the next book that I pulled off my shelves, because I just literally went through my shelves and picked off the books that I remembered not being able to put down, and books that had lots of twists and turns. And I was trying to choose books that were giving me, that I remembered giving me the feeling that I was getting as I was rereading The Girl on the Train and The Blue Hour. And another one that leapt off my shelf at me was Apple Tree Yard by Louise Doughty. Now this again was televised. I think it was a serial. And this is just, I mean, it's incredibly compelling. It tells the story of a woman called Yvonne Carmichael, who is married. She goes to give a presentation at the House of Commons in London, and she meets this man, and he offers to it's going to sound dodgy, and it is. He offers to show her the Undercroft, and he has access. He takes her down there. They have sex, and this is the initiation of an affair between her and this man. And he doesn't reveal his identity to her, so she just knows him as Mr. X. And what the novel does is it charts the impact of the affair on Yvonne herself, but also on her husband, obviously. And then it's complicated. The whole thing is complicated by the fact that there is a works party, and she attends the party, and one of her, I think it's her boss, approaches her, somebody she works with very closely, and he's obviously had feelings for her a long time, and he makes advances and she won't reciprocate. And I know this is, I don't know if this is a plot spoiler, I suppose it probably is, but he rapes her. And so we have this then she sort of breaks off the affair with Mr. X, but later reignites it, and then the novel sort of turns towards what happens when the work colleague keeps reappearing, and it is really sinister. And when you read this novel, you can't put it down. You feel really voyeuristic because there's this very steamy affair going on. They seem to enjoy having sex in very open places, you know, places where they could easily be discovered. And it really looks at the sort of the disintegration of this woman who was on the surface of it, you know, living a very sort of ordinary, well, I say ordinary, she's quite a high-flying woman. Yeah, and the effect it has on it and all the entanglements. And again, I just couldn't put it down. There are lots and lots of twists and turns in this novel. Yeah, wonderful. And the final book that I pulled off my shelf that I remember having me on the edge of my seat, and this was one I remember picking up in a charity shop. In fact, inside it says I paid £2 for it. What can you buy for £2? I read this probably, I don't know, about 10 years ago. Let's have a look. No, I read it in 2020. I read it 5 years ago. It seems longer than that. You can't see the title very well, but it's called I Saw a Man. And this book is so unsettling. It starts off with the main character, Michael, and he's entering a house. It's a family home. You can see the stairs here. They're very significant in the story. And for the first maybe half of the novel, he is wandering around this house. It's his neighbour's house. They're friends. He knows them really well. But mysteriously, the house is open. The door's open. He's gone round to borrow a screwdriver or something like that. And there's nobody in, and he can't understand it because normally, you know, they wouldn't leave their front door open. He's lived next door to them long enough, and he knows them. He's known them for long enough to know that this is really unusual. So he starts to sort of look around the house to kind of check. And so for the first half of the novel, he's exploring the house. And while he's doing that, we keep getting these flashbacks looking at his life. And he's lost his wife. I think she's called Caroline. She was out in Pakistan, and she was the victim of a drone strike. So he's grieving. He's sort of come to London, I think it's London, to sort of grieve, for a fresh start. They were living somewhere else, I think it was Wales, before she died. So he's had this whole sort of life change. He's a writer. But the novel is complicated by the fact that the pilot who was responsible for the drone has written to him and is struggling with guilt. So there is an awful lot in this novel about male grief, which I think is quite unusual. But the point about it is that, again, you're on the edge of your seat because something completely and utterly devastating happens. And again, I don't want to give anything away. But the way that Owen Sheers builds pace with this prowling around the house, and then the thing that happens, and the complication, the sort of twists and turns in Michael's life and experience are absolutely breathtaking. And again, I feel like I'm still walking around that place. I'm still feeling the emotions that I felt as I was reading the book. It had a profound effect on me reading this, as you can probably tell. And again, it's another one that I'd quite like to go back to, but whether I will or not is another matter. Anyway, there we are. So that's my, how many were there? I think there were 6 maybe 5, probably 6 thrillers that I commended to you there, in addition to the two Paula Hawkins novels. Please, I would love, one of the reasons I made this video was because I realised that I do really enjoy a good thriller. I enjoy a book that keeps me on the edge of my seat, where the plot drives everything. And I don't read novels like that very often. So one of the things I would absolutely be delighted would be if you would give me your recommendations in the, I can't even say it, recommendations, did that come out right? I don't know. Recommendations in the comments below, because I genuinely would like to know what they are. And also, you know, if you've read any of these books, I'd love to know. I'd love your feedback on your perspective on them as well. Anyway, happy, thrilling, wonderful, exciting reading, and I look forward to catching up with you next week. Take care all. Bye.